Thomas McAllister's weathered hands gripped the rough fence post as he watched the Arizona sunset. His ranch, nestled in a forgotten valley, had been as silent as his heart since Elizabeth's passing 3 years ago. At 42, Thomas had grown accustomed to speaking only to his horses and occasional travelers seeking water. The late November chill had settled early this year. After securing his mare in the stable, Thomas collected firewood and went inside the small 2-story house that still kept Elizabeth's touches. Faded curtains she'd sewn, mismatched china she'd brought west from Pennsylvania. As he prepared a simple meal, the distant sound of gunfire froze him mid-step. Thomas grabbed his Winchester and moved to the window. Minutes later, he caught sight of shadowy figures crossing his property toward the creek, with shouts and more gunfire following from afar. He slipped outside silently. Near the water, huddled against the earth, was a native woman clutching 2 children to her chest. Blood darkened her clothing. Behind her lay a motionless man with an arrow protruding from his shoulder. Their eyes met, and Thomas saw terror give way to resignation in her gaze. "I mean no harm," Thomas whispered, lowering his rifle. The woman remained still, watching him warily. He recognized their tribe by their clothing patterns. Navajo, far from their traditional lands. The distant shouts grew louder. Men on horseback were combing the area. "They'll find you here," Thomas said, gesturing toward the approaching voices. Making a decision that would forever alter his life, Thomas motioned toward his house. "Come, quickly." The woman hesitated only a moment before nudging the wounded man. Thomas helped lift him, and they made their way back to the ranch house in silence. Inside, Thomas secured the doors and windows before rekindling the fire. The family was exhausted, half-starved, and terrified. The man's wound wasn't immediately life-threatening. The arrow had pierced his upper shoulder but missed vital organs. "Water!" Thomas offered a ladle to the woman. She helped the children drink first before taking any herself. The pounding of hooves sent them all into stillness. Thomas moved to the window, seeing riders with torches passing along his property. "McAllister!" a voice called. "You there, McAllister?" Thomas recognized Sheriff Dawson's voice. With a warning glance at the family, Thomas stepped onto his porch, rifle held casually but visibly. "Evening, Sheriff. What brings you out after dark?" 6 riders approached. In the torchlight, Thomas could see Dawson's ruddy face and familiar figures from town. "Tracking renegades," Dawson replied. "Navajo family. Man, woman, 2 youngsters. Connected to the raid on Walker's cattle." Thomas kept his expression neutral. "Haven't seen anyone pass through. Been fixing fence on the North 40 most of the day." Dawson studied him. "These aren't just any Indians. They're from that bunch stirring up trouble with the army near Fort Defiance. The man's wanted for killing 2 soldiers last month." "Like I said, I haven't seen anyone," Thomas repeated. "If that changes, I'll ride into town." After the riders departed, Thomas returned inside. The woman's gaze met his, gratitude mixed with wariness. The wounded man had been laid near the fire, breathing shallowly but steadily. The children huddled against their mother, wide-eyed and silent. "My name is Thomas," he said, placing a hand on his chest. "Thomas McAllister." The woman hesitated before responding. "Nizhoni," she said softly, touching her own chest. She gestured to the wounded man. "Ashkii," then to the children. "Kai and Haloke." Thomas gathered medical supplies. Not much, but enough for basic treatment. Nizhoni watched his every move alertly. When he approached Ashkii with the supplies, she placed a protective hand on her husband's chest. "I want to help," Thomas said, showing her the bandages. "Help," he repeated, pantomiming. After a long moment, she nodded. Thomas examined the arrow wound and determined it needed to be pushed through rather than pulled back. Nizhoni placed a folded leather belt between Ashkii's teeth while the children were ushered away. Thomas pushed the arrow forward until the arrowhead emerged on the other side. Ashkii didn't cry out. Thomas disinfected the wound with whiskey before Nizhoni applied crushed herbs from a small pouch. Then they bandaged it together. Thomas offered them food. Simple fare, but more than they'd likely seen in days. Nizhoni ensured the children and Ashkii ate before herself. As they ate in silence, Thomas wondered about their story. Sheriff Dawson's accusations echoed in his mind. Yet looking at this exhausted, frightened family, he saw little evidence of the savagery townspeople attributed to native tribes. Later, with the family settled in his small guest room, Thomas sat alone by the dying fire. Tomorrow would bring decisions he wasn't prepared to make. Harboring fugitives could cost him everything. As dawn colored the eastern sky, Thomas rose, his decision made. Whatever truth lay behind Sheriff Dawson's accusations, he would not turn this family over to frontier justice. He had seen enough of that justice to know it held little resemblance to the ideals he'd once believed in. 3 days established a cautious rhythm at McAllister's ranch. Thomas maintained vigilant watch while Ashkee's condition improved under Nizhoni's care. Communication remained limited to gestures and few exchanged words, though 7-year-old Kai showed remarkable aptitude for learning English. On the 4th morning, Thomas spotted dust approaching from Copper Creek. He hurried inside, finding Nizhoni already at the window, her body tense with alarm. "Riders coming," Thomas said. "Hide." Nizhoni gathered the children and helped Ashkii to the root cellar beneath the kitchen floor. Thomas covered the trapdoor with a rug and moved a table over it before stepping outside. 3 men approached: Jacob Mercer, a prosperous local rancher, his foreman, Hatcher, and a stranger in Army Scouts' buckskins. "McAllister," Mercer called. "Sheriff Dawson mentioned he'd stopped by your place." Thomas nodded. "Looking for raiders," he said. "Not just raiders," the scout interjected. "Murderers. I'm Travis Holt, scout for the Army out of Fort Defiance. Been tracking this group for weeks." Thomas leaned his rifle against the porch post, a casual gesture that kept the weapon within reach. "What brings you to my property?" Holt's pale blue eyes scanned the ranch. "Tracks. Found signs heading in this direction. Fresh ones." "Plenty of game moves through here," Thomas replied. "Deer, pronghorn." "These weren't animal tracks," Holt said. "Mind if we look around?" Thomas knew refusing would only confirm their suspicions. "Help yourself to water from the pump. But I've got work to finish." He returned to splitting wood while keeping the men in his peripheral vision. When they approached the stable, Thomas's heart quickened. He had hidden the family's possessions beneath the hay. A flash of movement caught his attention. Kai had somehow slipped out of the cellar and stood frozen, partially visible behind the rain barrel. Thomas deliberately dropped his axe with a loud clatter, drawing the men's attention while positioning himself between them and the boy. Reaching the porch, he subtly gestured for Kai to go back inside. The boy darted through the side door just as Holt emerged from the stable. "You've had visitors recently," the scout stated. "Found moccasin prints by your well. Small ones like a child might make." "Had a Hopi trader pass through 2 days ago," Thomas replied. "Might have had his family with him." "Hopi, you say?" Holt raised his eyebrows. "This far north?" "Didn't ask for his travel plans. Wasn't my business." Mercer moved closer, hand resting on his pistol. "Folks are getting nervous. 3 settlers killed last month. Army patrol ambushed, cattle missing. Nobody's safe while these renegades are loose." "I mind my own affairs," Thomas said evenly. Hatcher spat tobacco juice. "Mighty brave talk for a man living alone out here." "Or are you alone, McAllister?" Holt interrupted the standoff. "We'll be organizing a proper search party tomorrow. 15-20 men. Cover every inch of this valley." Thomas understood the real message. This is your last chance to turn them in voluntarily. After they departed, Thomas found Kai trembling in Nizhoni's arms as the family emerged from the cellar. The terror in their eyes told him everything. "Not safe here now," Thomas said slowly. "They come back tomorrow." "Many men." Nizhoni spoke to Ashkii in their language, gesturing toward the east. Finally, she turned to Thomas. "We go," she said simply. "Tonight." Thomas shook his head. Ashkii too weak. They watched trails. He gestured in all directions. "Men everywhere now." As dusk approached, Thomas wrote a brief note and secured it to his fastest horse's bridle. He sent the animal galloping toward a gap in the distant mesas, hoping his message would reach its destination in time. That night, Thomas reinforced the doors and windows and distributed his weapons. He showed Nizhoni how to load and fire the shotgun, recognizing in her quick understanding that this wasn't her first encounter with firearms. After their meal, little Haloke approached Thomas with a small, carved wooden horse clutched in her tiny hand. She held it out to him, her solemn eyes watching his face. Thomas knelt to accept the gift, his throat tightening with unexpected emotion. "Thank you," he said softly. Haloke smiled for the first time since their arrival, a fleeting expression that transformed her face. She touched the back of his weathered hand before retreating to her mother's side. In that moment, whatever doubts Thomas had harbored vanished. These were not murderous savages, but people, a family fighting to survive in a world that had decided their existence was inconvenient. As the children slept, Thomas and Nizhoni remained by the fire. Ashkii had been moved to the bedroom where he could rest more comfortably. "Why you help?" Nizhoni asked suddenly. "Why risk?" Thomas stared into the flames. "My wife," he said finally, touching his wedding band. "Elizabeth. She'd die. 3 winters past. Fever." He gestured toward his chest, indicating emptiness. "After, nothing matter. Just waiting." Nizhoni nodded, understanding filling her expression. "Your spirit walk alone too long," she said. "Need purpose." "Maybe," Thomas conceded. "Or maybe just tired of watching people die when I could help." Nizhoni reached for the turquoise necklace she wore, lifting it over her head. "For protection," she said, offering it to him. "Old magic. Strong." Thomas hesitated, recognizing the significance. "I can't take," she insisted. "You need more than we." He accepted the necklace, feeling the weight of the stones in his palm. He slipped it over his head, tucking it beneath his shirt. Thomas woke at false dawn to something disturbing his sleep, a sound out of place. He reached for his rifle, moving silently to the window. What he saw stole his breath. Surrounding his property in a wide circle, barely visible in the pre-dawn light, were hundreds of mounted figures. Native warriors from multiple tribes, judging by variations in their dress, stretched around his land as far as he could see. "Nizhoni," Thomas called softly. She joined him, her sharp intake of breath the only indication of her surprise. The children crowded behind her, eyes wide. "Your message," Nizhoni whispered. "It reached the people." Thomas had sent his horse toward a small encampment of peaceful Navajo he'd encountered months earlier. His note had been simple: family in danger, need safe passage. What had arrived instead was an army. As the sun rose, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, riders approaching from Copper Creek. The search party had arrived, unaware they were riding into unprecedented confrontation. The approaching riders, 25 men led by Sheriff Dawson and Scout Holt, pulled up sharply when they saw the warriors surrounding McAllister's ranch. From the native ranks, 3 mounted figures moved forward to meet Dawson, Holt, and Captain Reynolds from Fort Defiance. The delegations conversed for what seemed an eternity before separating. A single rider broke from the native line and galloped toward the house. Matto, the Navajo elder to whom Thomas had sent his message. "McAllister," he called. "The white chiefs wish to speak with you, alone." Thomas glanced at Nizhoni, who nodded. "Speak truth," she said. "They already decide we guilty. Only truth matter now." Thomas mounted his horse and rode with Matto to the meeting point. Sheriff Dawson didn't waste time on pleasantries. "McAllister, you've got yourself in a damned mess. Harboring fugitives, interfering with lawful pursuit." He gestured toward the gathered warriors. "And now this." "I wasn't aware protecting innocent people was against the law," Thomas replied evenly. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "Mr. McAllister, we have evidence linking this family to attacks on settlers and an army patrol. The man, Ashkii, was identified by survivors." "What evidence exactly?" Thomas asked. Holt spat into the dust. "Found his knife at one of the killing sites. Distinctive handle, Navajo work. Or unless someone wants to make it look like he was there," Thomas countered. A murmur of agreement came from the three native leaders, an elderly Apache man, a younger Hopi warrior, and a Navajo woman whose elaborate silver jewelry marked her importance. "We know of this man, Ashkii," the Apache elder said. "He is no killer. He was teacher at mission school until soldiers came. Burned it. Blamed Indians for attack by white raiders." Captain Reynolds frowned. "That's a serious accusation." "It is truth," the Navajo woman replied. "Many witnesses, soldiers led by traitor with yellow hair." Her gaze shifted pointedly to Holt, whose pale blonde hair hung in a long braid. "Is that why you've been tracking them so diligently, Holt?" Thomas asked. "Tying up loose ends?" The scout's hand moved toward his pistol. "Watch yourself, McAllister." Thomas pressed his advantage. "Sheriff, have you actually seen any evidence beyond Holt's word?" The sheriff's hesitation was answer enough. "The mission school was on land with silver deposits," the Hopi warrior interjected. "Land that now belongs to mining company that pays Army scouts very well." Captain Reynolds turned to Holt. "Is this true?" "It's Indian superstition," Holt snapped. "There's no silver." "3 new claims filed last month," Thomas interrupted. "In your name and Jacob Mercer's. Public record at the territorial office." Holt's face darkened. With startling speed, he drew his pistol, aiming at Captain Reynolds. Before he could fire, a shot rang out. Holt staggered, blood blooming across his shirt. Behind him stood Jacob Mercer, smoke curling from his revolver barrel. "Enough," Mercer said gruffly. "I didn't sign on for murdering Army officers or framing innocent folks. Holt came to me with the silver scheme. Said all we had to do was clear some Indians off the land. I went along until I found out he'd killed those settlers himself to turn opinion against the tribes." Captain Reynolds knelt beside the fallen scout, confirming he was dead. "We still need to sort this out properly," Dawson said. "The territorial governor will want statements, evidence." "And the family?" Thomas asked. The Apache elder stepped forward. "They come with us. Safe passage to Canyon de Chelly. Army witnesses the journey." The captain nodded. "I can arrange an escort, and I'll personally investigate these allegations about the mission school and mining claims." Thomas returned to inform Nizhoni's family of the outcome. "It's over," he said simply. "Holt was behind the attacks. He killed settlers and blamed your people to clear land for silver mining." Nizhoni translated for Ashkii, whose face registered first disbelief, then profound relief. He extended his hand to Thomas, a gesture learned from white missionaries. "Thank you," Ashkii said carefully, one of the few English phrases he knew. Outside, preparations were underway. The confrontation that had threatened violence was dissolving into uneasy but peaceful resolution. Matto explained, "The people will move south before sunset, safer to travel by night." As Nizhoni gathered their few possessions, Thomas found himself reluctant to see them leave. These strangers had broken through the wall of isolation he'd built since Elizabeth's death. "You come with us?" Kai asked suddenly, looking up with hopeful eyes. The question caught Thomas off guard. "I can't, little one. My place is here." Nizhoni approached. "He asks because you are alone," she explained. "Our way says no one should walk alone if they have found family." The word family lingered in the air between them. "I have responsibilities here," Thomas said, though even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow. Nizhoni studied him. "Land does not need man," she said. "Man needs people." As the family prepared to leave, each member acknowledged Thomas in their own way, Ashkii with a dignified nod, Kai with an impulsive hug, Haloke by touching his hand as she had the night before. When it came to Nizhoni, she stopped before him, reaching up to touch the turquoise necklace visible at his collar. "This will guide you," she said softly, "when you decide where your path leads." Thomas stood on his porch, watching as the procession formed, the family surrounded by warriors, with Captain Reynolds and soldiers riding at a respectful distance. As they moved away, the setting sun cast long shadows before them. Matto lingered behind. "You have earned the respect of many tribes today," he told Thomas. "The invitation stands." Should you tire of speaking only to the wind and your horses, there is a place for you among the people." That night, sleep eluded Thomas. The house, which had briefly pulsed with life, now seemed emptier than before. He sat by the dying fire, turning Haloke's carved wooden horse in his hands. By dawn, Thomas had made his decision. He packed essentials, secured the house, and released the livestock. The ranch had never been much more than a place to exist after Elizabeth's death, not truly a home. As the first light broke over the eastern mesas, Thomas McAllister mounted his horse and turned south, following the faint tracks left by the procession. The turquoise necklace hung warm against his skin, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt something stirring within his chest that might, with time, remember how to be hope. The journey to Canyon de Chelly took Thomas 4 days. On the afternoon of the 4th day, he crested a rise to behold the vast network of red sandstone canyons. The dying sunlight painted the walls in shades of flame, while shadows pooled in the depths. 2 mounted figures observed his approach. One disappeared into the canyon while the other waited. The Navajo woman with silver jewelry who had been present at the confrontation. As Thomas drew closer, she greeted him. "You are far from your ranch, Thomas McAllister." "I was invited," Thomas replied simply. "Yes," she said finally. "You were. I am Hosea, elder of this band. Come, they will want to know you have arrived." Hosea led him along the canyon rim until they reached a path descending into its depths. The canyon seemed to swallow them, walls rising on either side until only a ribbon of sky remained visible overhead. The path eventually opened into a wider area where an encampment nestled against the base of towering walls. Hogans constructed of logs and earth stood in family groupings, with corrals for sheep and horses nearby. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Children paused in their play, women looked up from weaving, and men turned from their tasks to observe the white stranger riding beside Hosea. Mato emerged from a nearby hogan, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "You have come," the old man said, clasping Thomas's arm. "I thought perhaps you would." A commotion drew their attention. Kai burst from a doorway, his face alight when he spotted Thomas. The boy raced across the open space, shouting, "Thomas! You come!" Thomas knelt to meet the boy at eye level. "I said I couldn't. I was wrong." Behind Kai came Haloke, approaching more cautiously but with bright recognition in her eyes. "Horse?" she asked, making a gesture with her hands. Thomas produced the carved wooden figure from his pocket, offering it back. "I brought it home," he said gently. Haloke's face bloomed into a smile. She accepted the carving, then surprised Thomas by wrapping her arms around his neck in a brief, fierce hug. By now, Nizhoni and Ashkii had emerged as well. Ashkii moved with greater strength, though he still leaned on a walking stick. Nizhoni's reaction to Thomas's arrival was more measured than the children's. "You left your land," she said, a statement rather than a question. Thomas straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "Land is just dirt and rock without people to give it meaning." Something shifted in Nizhoni's expression, a softening perhaps, or recognition of the journey he had undertaken. "You are welcome here," she said simply. The meal that followed was unlike any Thomas had experienced in years, not because of the food, but because of the community surrounding him. Families gathered around the central fire, sharing not just sustenance, but stories and laughter. Through conversations, Thomas pieced together more of the family's story. Ashkii had been a teacher at the mission school, where Nizhoni worked as a translator. When white raiders burned the school, killing the missionary couple who ran it, they had fled with their children. "We heard stories of a white man who traded fairly with the people," Ashkii explained. "Man who helped Navajo hunter when horse broke his leg 2 winters past. We hope to find this man." Thomas remembered the incident, a young Navajo man with a badly fractured leg whom he had sheltered before the man's family found him. "That small kindness made you seek me out?" Thomas asked, surprised. Mato chuckled softly. In these lands, small kindnesses are remembered like water in the desert, precious because they are rare. Days passed into weeks, and weeks into months. Thomas learned the rhythms of life in Canyon de Chelly. His carpentry skills proved valuable in constructing and repairing dwellings. Kai and Haloke adopted him as an honorary uncle, appearing at his door each morning eager to show him their latest discoveries. Ashkii, fully recovered, became an unexpected friend. Their conversations bridged cultural divides through shared experiences of loss and resilience. And Nizhoni, their relationship evolved slowly, with the careful deliberation of two people who had known great sorrow and were wary of risking their hearts again. They found common ground in their protective love for the children, their practical approach to daily challenges, and eventually, their willingness to see possibility where once there had been only survival. On a clear autumn evening, nearly a year after Thomas had followed the family to Canyon de Chelly, he and Nizhoni walked along the canyon rim, watching the sunset. They had fallen into the habit of these evening walks. "Captain Reynolds brought news," Nizhoni said. "The new governor has granted amnesty to all families affected by the false accusations. Ashkii's name has been cleared. It's a small justice, but better than none. He also brought this," Nizhoni continued, producing a folded document from her pocket. "For you." It was a deed. The official transfer of Thomas's ranch property to the government in exchange for compensation. "So it's done," Thomas said quietly. "The ranch is no longer mine. Do you regret it?" Nizhoni asked, studying his face. Thomas considered honestly. The ranch had been his last tangible connection to Elizabeth, to the life they had planned together. "No," he said finally. "Elizabeth would understand. She never wanted the land itself. She wanted a home, a place where love could grow." He turned to face Nizhoni. "I've found that here in ways I never expected." The turquoise necklace still hung around his neck. He touched it now. "This guided me to you," he said softly. "To all of you." Nizhoni stepped closer, her hand rising to cover his where it rested on the turquoise. "The stones didn't guide you," she said. "Your heart did. The stones merely gave you courage to listen to it." The touch of her hand sent warmth through Thomas's chest. They stood connected by the necklace and something deeper growing between them. Not a replacement for what either had lost, but something new that honored the past while embracing possibility. Below them, the encampment prepared for the evening meal. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children's laughter echoed against canyon walls, and soft songs floated upward. Among those voices, Thomas could distinguish Kai's excited chatter and Haloke's melodic tones. "We should go back," Nizhoni said eventually, though she made no move to release his hand. "They will be waiting for us." Thomas gently lifted her hand to his lips in a gesture that bridged his world and hers. "Thank you," he said simply, "for showing me the way home." Nizhoni's smile held all the warmth of the setting sun. "We found it together," she replied, "as we will find what comes next." Hand in hand, they made their way toward the lights of the encampment, where a family waited, not bound by blood, but by choice, by shared struggle, and by the quiet courage it takes to begin again when all seems lost. Thomas McAllister, once a solitary rancher lost in grief, walked toward the firelight surrounded by the voices of his new family, his heart finally at peace. The turquoise stones hung warm against his skin, no longer a talisman of protection, but a reminder that the boundaries we draw between worlds exist only in our minds. With courage, they can be crossed. With love, they can be erased entirely. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it moved you, if it made you feel something deep inside, we warmly invite you to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who loves heartfelt stories. Your support means the world to us. Please subscribe to our channel and support us from the bottom of your heart so we can continue creating new stories filled with love, redemption, and unexpected turns. Every view, every like, and every word of encouragement keeps our storytelling spirit alive. And don't forget, at the end of this video, there's a suggestion for another story from our channel. Click and be surprised by another emotional journey, just as powerful and unforgettable as this one.